While recording data on a hillside, Evan froze, binoculars still in his hands as he noticed movement atop a rocky ledge. Two bobcats were staring at him like statues. Knowing the danger, he prepared to leave them in peace. As he turned, a third, larger bobcat stood just feet away, cutting off his only escape route. He was surrounded, trapped by three wild predators. Bracing for the inevitable, he crouched and shielded his face, waiting for the attack. But it never came. Instead, the largest one stepped forward and did something that defied all instinct. Her gaze not feral, but strangely familiar. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The air in the Sierra Madre carried a scent Evan hadn't breathed in years. The clean, sharp perfume of pine mingling with the damp, loamy smell of healing earth. A decade ago, this same air had been thick with the acrid smoke of the Eaton fire, a monstrous blaze that had consumed nearly 50,000 acres, leaving behind a monochrome world of ash and charcoal. He remembered the silence that had followed, a profound, unnatural quiet where the chirps of birds and the rustle of unseen creatures had been replaced by the mournful whisper of wind through skeletal trees. Now, at 42, Evan was no longer the fresh-faced graduate student who had volunteered on the fire lines, but a seasoned ecologist tasked with studying this very forest's remarkable comeback. He adjusted the strap of his pack, his boots crunching softly on a carpet of new growth pushing up between the blackened husks of long-dead manzanita. Resilience. It was a word he used often in his reports, a clinical term for a miracle. All around him, life was stubbornly, beautifully reasserting itself. Velvety green moss clung to fallen logs. Vibrant Indian paintbrush dotted the slopes with slashes of crimson, and the steady trickle of a revived stream cut a silver path through the undergrowth. He found a suitable spot on a gentle rise, a place that offered a panoramic view of the recovering valley. Kneeling, he pulled his notebook and a pair of binoculars from his pack. His job was to quantify the miracle, to translate it into data points and growth charts. Quercus douglasii, blue oak, showing strong sapling presence. Ceanothus, wild lilac, thriving as a pioneer species. He noted the tracks of a mule deer near the streambed and smiled. The forest's pulse was growing stronger every day. For hours, he worked with the quiet focus of a man who loved his trade. The sun climbed high, warming the granite outcroppings around him. It was during a lull, as he was sketching the distribution of a patch of lupine, that a flicker of movement caught his eye. He lifted his binoculars, his hand steady, and scanned a rocky ledge about 100 yards away. There, bathed in the golden afternoon light, were two bobcats. They moved with the fluid, muscular grace that was unique to their kind, their tufted ears twitching, their spotted coats a perfect camouflage against the dappled rock. Evan's breath caught in his throat. A sighting like this was a gift. They were magnificent, likely yearlings or young adults, their bodies lean and powerful. He watched them for several minutes as they paced the ledge, occasionally stopping to groom or gaze out over their territory. A healthy breeding population was the ultimate sign of a restored ecosystem. He made a quick, excited note in his log. Knowing the protocols, he understood the importance of giving them a wide berth. A direct encounter, especially with more than one, could be unpredictable and dangerous. Wild animals were not characters in a storybook. They were driven by instinct, and a cornered predator was a formidable foe. He decided it was time to pack up and head back, leaving them to their domain. He capped his pen and began to quietly gather his equipment, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. He had just clipped his canteen to his pack when a profound stillness fell over the hillside. The lazy drone of insects ceased. The birds went silent. A primal instinct, buried deep within his civilized mind, screamed a warning. He wasn't alone. Slowly, heart beginning to thud against his ribs like a trapped bird, he straightened up and turned. Not 20 feet behind him stood a third bobcat. This one was different. She was larger than the two on the ledge, her frame heavier, her presence radiating an aura of absolute command. This was the matriarch. Her yellow eyes, intelligent and unblinking, were fixed directly on him. There was no curiosity in her gaze, only a calm, unnerving assessment. The two younger bobcats had slipped down from the ledge and were now flanking her, forming a silent, intimidating crescent that effectively cut off his retreat. Fear, cold and sharp, shot through Evan's veins. His training, his logic, every rational thought evaporated, replaced by the raw animal instinct to survive. He was surrounded, outnumbered by 3 predators who could tear him apart in minutes. He slowly lowered himself to a crouch, making himself smaller, less of a threat. He tucked his head and raised his arms to shield his face, his mind bracing for the searing pain of claws and fangs. The scent of pine and wild sage filled his nostrils, a scent he suddenly thought might be his last. He waited, muscles screaming with tension for the inevitable attack. But it didn't come. Seconds stretched into an eternity. He could hear the soft padding of paws on the dry ground, the whisper of a breeze through the grass. Then he felt a gentle but firm pressure against his shoulder. It wasn't a claw. It was a nudge, a deliberate push from a furry head. He dared to peek through his fingers. The matriarch stood so close he could see the individual whiskers on her muzzle and the steady rise and fall of her chest. Her gaze was no longer just assessing. It was searching, tinged with something he couldn't name. It was strangely, impossibly familiar. The younger cats watched, their expressions placid, their bodies relaxed. They were taking their cues from her. There was no hostility here, only a quiet, unsettling ceremony he didn't understand. And then his eyes drifted down, following the line of her powerful shoulder to her foreleg. He saw it, a patch of skin, pale and puckered, where the tawny, spotted fur had never grown back. It was a long, thin scar, a permanent reminder of a past agony. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The 10 years between then and now collapsed into a single, breathless moment. The scent of smoke, long dormant in his memory, flooded his senses. The image of a smoldering landscape, of a small, broken creature huddled in the ashes, flashed behind his eyes with blinding clarity. Ember? He whispered, the name a ghost on his lips. 10 years earlier, the Eaton fire was a vision of hell on Earth. Evan, then a 22-year-old grad student studying botany, had put his thesis on hold to join the legions of volunteers. He wasn't a firefighter. He was part of the support crew, hauling hoses, delivering supplies, and later, joining the grim search and rescue teams for wildlife. The fire had moved with terrifying speed, a roaring beast that had outrun deer and trapped coyotes in their dens. For weeks, the world was a nightmare of smoke-choked days and nights that glowed a hellish orange. When the flames finally subsided, they left behind a wasteland. Evan walked through the skeletal remains of the forest, the ground still hot beneath his boots. The scale of the destruction was soul-crushing. His work involved documenting the damage, but mostly it was a mercy mission. Most animals they found had already succumbed to the smoke or flames. The few they found alive were often so badly injured that the kindest thing was a swift, humane end. He was combing through a ravaged ravine when he found her. She was almost invisible, her singed coat blending with the blackened soil. She lay curled into a tight ball beside the charred roots of an oak tree, trembling violently. One of her front legs was a raw, angry red, the flesh scorched and blistered. When he moved closer, she let out a low, guttural growl, a sound of pure defiance mixed with agony. Her eyes, wide with terror and pain, blazed at him from a soot-streaked face. He radioed for a vet tech. By the time Sarah arrived, a weary woman with compassionate eyes and ash in her hair, a small group of volunteers had gathered. Sarah knelt and examined the bobcat from a safe distance. Her expression was grim. "Third-degree burns," she said, her voice heavy with fatigue. "Deep tissue damage. She's in shock, dehydrated, and the risk of infection is almost 100%. She looked up at Evan and the others. "I'm sorry. The most humane thing to do is to put her down. She's in too much pain, and her chances are next to none." The others nodded in somber agreement. It was a logic they had been forced to accept many times over the past weeks. Their resources were stretched thin, and their duty was to end suffering where they could. But Evan couldn't accept it. He looked at the small, fierce creature, at the untamed spirit still burning in her eyes despite the agony. She wasn't giving up. How could he? "No," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Please, let me try." Sarah sighed. "Son, I admire your heart, but this is beyond a rescue. This is a long, painful rehabilitation with almost no chance of a successful release. We don't have the facilities for that kind of long-term care." "I'll do it," Evan insisted, his gaze locked on the bobcat. "I'll take responsibility. I have a small, isolated shed at my rental. I'll cover the cost of the medical supplies. Just give her a chance. Give me a chance to help her." He saw the doubt in their faces, but he also saw a flicker of hope in Sarah's. She looked from Evan's determined face to the suffering animal, and after a long moment, she relented. "All right," she said, handing him a kit with sedatives, antibiotics, and burn cream. "But you need to be realistic. If she gets worse, you call me, and we do what's necessary. Understand?" Evan nodded, his throat tight with gratitude. "I understand." The first few days were a harrowing ordeal. He named her Ember, a tribute to the fire she had miraculously survived. Getting her into a large kennel and back to his place was a challenge that left him with several deep scratches. She was wild, terrified, and in excruciating pain. She snarled and spat at him whenever he approached, her body a coiled spring of fear and aggression. Cleaning and dressing her wound was a battle of wills. He wore thick leather gloves, but her spirit was stronger than any material. She fought him with every ounce of her dwindling strength. So he changed his tactics. He started by simply sitting outside her kennel for hours, speaking to her in a low, soothing monotone. He told her about his day, about the trees he was studying, about his hopes for the forest's return. He never made sudden moves. He just let her get used to his presence, his scent, his voice. Slowly, agonizingly, something began to shift. She stopped growling the moment he entered the shed. He would slide a bowl of water and some raw meat into her kennel, and after he retreated to his chair, she would limp over and eat. The breakthrough came a week later. Her leg needed to be cleaned again. He approached the kennel, his heart pounding, expecting the usual vicious response. He opened the door slowly. She watched him, her body tense, but she didn't hiss. As he reached in with the saline wash and clean bandages, she laid her head down on her paws and let out a soft, mournful whine. She let him tend to the wound, her body trembling, but she didn't fight. From that day on, a fragile trust was forged. He continued to talk to her, and she began to respond with soft chirps and the occasional low, rumbling purr that vibrated through the floor. The wound began to heal, the raw flesh slowly covered by a layer of new, pink skin. He would watch her for hours, marveling at her resilience. He saw glimpses of the wild cat she was. The way she would pounce on a leaf that blew into the shed, the intense focus in her eyes as she watched a moth flutter near the light bulb. He knew from the beginning that she could never be a pet. His goal was always to return her to the wild. As she grew stronger, he spent less time with her, re-establishing the natural boundary between man and wild animal. He brought her live mice in a contained box to reawaken her hunting instincts. She was a natural, quick, and lethal. The day of her release was one of the most difficult of his life. Her leg had healed, leaving behind the long, hairless scar. She was strong, her coat had grown back thick and healthy, and the wildness had fully returned to her eyes. He drove her back to the edge of the burn zone, where new green shoots were just beginning to appear. He opened the kennel door, his heart a painful knot in his chest. She hesitated for a moment, looking back at him. Their eyes met, and in that shared gaze, Evan felt a profound connection, a silent acknowledgement of all they had been through. Then, with a flick of her tail, she was gone, a tawny shadow disappearing into the recovering wilderness. Evan returned to that spot many times over the next year. He never saw her up close again, but once, through his binoculars, he caught a fleeting glimpse of a female bobcat with a distinct limp, followed by a single, tiny, spotted cub. A surge of joy and relief washed over him. She had not only survived, she was thriving. She was passing on the gift of life he had helped preserve. And now, a decade later, here she was. Ember. She stood before him not as a wounded victim, but as a confident matriarch, a queen in her own realm. The two powerful young bobcats at her side were her legacy, the living proof of her resilience. They were the cub he had seen, and another born since, now grown and sharing her territory. The fear Evan had felt moments ago melted away, replaced by an overwhelming wave of awe and emotion. He slowly lowered his arms and rose from his crouch, his movements measured. He looked into Ember's intelligent eyes and saw not just a wild animal, but a being with memory, and perhaps something akin to gratitude. "Ember," he said again, his voice thick. "It's you. You're okay." She blinked slowly, a distinctly feline gesture of trust. She took another step closer and rubbed her head against his leg, a gesture so reminiscent of a domestic cat that it brought tears to his eyes. The purr that rumbled from her chest was a deep, resonant vibration he felt through the soles of his boots. It was the same purr he had heard in the shed all those years ago. The two younger cats observed this interaction with quiet curiosity. They showed no fear of him, only a placid acceptance modeled on their mother's behavior. It was as if she had brought them here for a specific reason: to meet the strange, two-legged creature from her past, the one who had intervened when fire had nearly claimed her. It was an introduction, a presentation of her success. "This is my family," she seemed to be saying. "This is the life you saved." The moment felt sacred, suspended in time. The forest, the mountains, the vast blue sky all bore witness. He reached out a trembling hand and gently stroked the top of her head, just behind her tufted ears. Her fur was thick and soft. She allowed the touch for a few seconds before stepping back, her duty done. The brief, profound acknowledgement was over. With a low chuff to her offspring, Ember turned and melted back into the chaparral. Her two children gave Evan one last, lingering look before following her, their movements silent and seamless. Within seconds, they were gone, as if they had been nothing more than a sun-drenched mirage. Evan stood motionless for a long time, the warmth of her fur still tingling on his fingertips. The silence that returned was different now. It was not empty, but filled with the weight of what had just happened. He was trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer, staggering beauty of the encounter. Later that evening, back at his research cabin, he sat at his laptop to log the day's findings. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. He typed with the clinical precision his profession demanded. Female bobcat, lynx rufus, with old burn scar on left foreleg observed with 2 mature offspring, estimated 18 to 24 months old. Sighting suggests habitat recovery is sufficient to support a stable breeding predator population. Breeding cycle intact. He closed the notebook, the sterile words a stark contrast to the truth of the experience. The data could never capture the feeling of Ember's head bumping against his shoulder, the depth of recognition in her eyes, or the thunderous purr that had spoken of a bond forged in fire and ash. He looked out the window at the mountains, now silhouetted against a twilight sky painted in shades of lavender and rose. The scar on Ember's leg was a map of her survival. It reminded him that some fires never fully erase what they burn, but that the scars left behind can become the foundation for new life. Survival itself had become the seed of rebirth. For her and for the forest, they both called home. As the first stars began to prick the darkening sky, Evan knew that the data would be forgotten, the reports filed away. But the memory of Ember's golden eyes and the shocking, beautiful surprise she had brought him would endure long after the last ember of his own life had faded.